My name is Kellen. I'm a senior account manager at Meridian Financial, one of those gleaming corporate firms that occupies half a skyscraper in the financial district. I've been here for 4 years, climbing the ladder with determination, if not exactly passion. The work is demanding but lucrative, the hours long but structured. My life follows a similar pattern: organized, predictable, carefully maintained. At least it did, until 3 months ago, when everything I thought I knew about my colleague Bo Mitchell turned out to be spectacularly wrong. Bo joined Meridian about a year ago, transferring from our Seattle office with impressive credentials and a reputation for analytical brilliance. He was immediately assigned to the desk opposite mine in our department's open floor plan, which should have meant we'd develop some kind of rapport. Instead, he remained an enigma, unfailingly professional but distinctly aloof. He was attractive in that perfectly polished way that seemed almost manufactured for corporate success. Tall, with dark hair always neatly styled, keen hazel eyes behind fashionable glasses, and a wardrobe of impeccably tailored suits. Every day, he arrived precisely at 7:45 a.m., brought his own lunch in a sleek stainless steel container, and left promptly at 6:30 p.m. unless client obligations demanded otherwise. Our interactions were limited to work necessities, collaborative projects, department meetings, the occasional elevator ride. He was never impolite, but there was a cool reserve to his demeanor that discouraged casual conversation. While the rest of us occasionally grabbed drinks after work or chatted about weekend plans, Bo remained separate, declining invitations with polite efficiency and offering minimal personal information when asked. Theories about him circulated through office gossip. Some thought he was simply shy. Others suggested he was strategically distancing himself to maintain professional boundaries. The more imaginative speculated about a mysterious past or secret life outside work. I didn't participate in the speculation, but I couldn't deny a certain curiosity about my inscrutable colleague. Then came that Friday in September when our carefully separated worlds collided in the most unexpected way possible. It had been a brutal week. The kind where client demands pile up, deadlines converge, and the executive team suddenly requires comprehensive reports that weren't on anyone's radar. By Friday evening, most of our department had either fled at the earliest opportunity or retreated to the nearby bar that served as unofficial headquarters for corporate decompression. I'd opted for a different kind of release. Instead of joining colleagues for predictable happy hour complaints, I headed to Spectrum, an underground electronic music venue that had become my secret weekend refuge. Located in a converted warehouse in the industrial district, it was everything Meridian wasn't: chaotic, vibrant, uninhibited. Few things cleared my head like losing myself on that dance floor, surrounded by strangers united only by the pulsing beats and the freedom of anonymity. I arrived around 11, when the night was just hitting its stride. The main room was already packed, bathed in strobing blue light, while a DJ I didn't recognize built a hypnotic rhythm that vibrated through the concrete floor. I made my way to the bar, ordered a whiskey neat, and found a spot along the wall where I could observe the crowd before deciding whether to join it. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought I was mistaken. The lighting was tricky, and the possibility of encountering Bo Mitchell in this environment seemed absurdly remote. But as the lights swept across the dance floor, there was no mistaking that profile, those shoulders. Bo, my buttoned-up, aloof colleague, was dancing with complete abandon in the center of the floor. The shock wasn't just that he was there, but how he was there. Gone was the tailored suit, replaced by dark jeans and a simple black t-shirt that clung to his frame. His normally precise hair was slightly tousled, his glasses absent. Most striking was his expression: eyes closed, features relaxed into something like joy, body moving with the confident rhythm of someone entirely in their element. He looked like a different person. Or perhaps, I realized with a jolt, like his actual self, liberated from the corporate constraints we both inhabited during daylight hours. I remained frozen at the edge of the room, whiskey halfway to my lips, unsure of the protocol for encountering a coworker in a place so removed from our shared professional context. Should I acknowledge him? Pretend I hadn't seen him? Leave altogether to preserve whatever boundary he clearly maintained between his work and personal life? Before I could decide, the decision was made for me. The lights changed direction, illuminating my position against the wall. Bo's eyes opened, scanned the crowd in a casual sweep, then stopped abruptly when they landed on me. I watched recognition dawn on his face, followed by something I couldn't quite identify. Surprise, certainly, but not exactly dismay. For a suspended moment, we simply looked at each other across the crowded room, mutual discovery hanging between us. Then, to my surprise, he smiled, a genuine expression I had never seen at the office, and began making his way toward me. "Kellen," he said when he reached me, his voice carrying just enough to be heard over the music. "This is unexpected. I was thinking the same thing," I replied, still struggling to reconcile this version of Bo with the one I thought I knew. Up close, the transformation was even more striking. There was an ease to his posture, a brightness to his eyes that I'd never noticed under the fluorescent office lighting. "I didn't know you were into electronic music," he continued, gesturing vaguely toward the DJ booth. "4 years of secrets revealed," I said with a slight smile. "I come here most weekends. It's a good way to reset after the corporate grind." He nodded, understanding immediately. "That's exactly why I'm here. Couldn't face another Friday at Hartford's listening to Marcus complain about his billable hours." Hartford's was the aforementioned corporate bar, and Marcus our most reliably aggrieved colleague. The accuracy of his assessment surprised a laugh out of me. "How long have you been coming here?" I asked, curiosity overtaking my initial awkwardness. "Since about a month after I moved here. Took some time to find the right spot." He glanced around the venue with evident appreciation. "Spectrum reminds me of places I used to go in Seattle. Authentic, not too scene-y." The conversation felt surreal, not just because we were having it in this unexpected location, but because it was easily the most personal exchange we'd ever shared. At the office, our interactions rarely ventured beyond project details and client updates. "Can I buy you a drink?" I offered, indicating my now empty glass. He seemed to consider this for a moment, perhaps weighing the implications of extending our encounter beyond simple acknowledgement. "Sure," he finally said. "Vodka soda, thanks." At the bar, I found myself unexpectedly nervous. This wasn't a date, obviously, but it wasn't exactly a casual drink with a colleague either. We'd stumbled across each other in a space that represented escape from our professional identities. The usual scripts didn't apply. When I returned with our drinks, Bo had found a slightly quieter spot near a support column. The music had shifted to something with a deeper bass line that reverberated through the concrete floor and up into my chest. "Thanks," he said, accepting the glass. "So, electronic music. Wouldn't have guessed that from your Spotify playlists." I raised an eyebrow. "You've noticed my Spotify playlists?" A slight flush colored his cheeks, visible even in the dim lighting. "Sometimes you play music at your desk with your earbuds in. The titles show up on the shared office account. Mostly classical during work hours," I acknowledged. "Helps me concentrate. This," I gestured toward the DJ booth, "is for when I need to stop thinking entirely." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I get that. Different music for different purposes. What about you? Any other surprising musical interests I should know about, now that we're sharing secrets?" His smile returned, a bit wry this time. "I contain multitudes, Kellen, but mainly variations on this. House, techno, some trance. Music you can get lost in." The way he said my name, slightly different from his office pronunciation, more relaxed, caught my attention. I realized I'd rarely heard him use it at work, where he tended toward last names or no names at all. "I never would have guessed," I admitted. "You seem so buttoned up, boring, corporate drone," he supplied, no offense in his tone. "I was going to say reserved," I corrected, though he wasn't entirely wrong about my perception. Bo laughed, the sound almost lost in the music but the movement of it visible in his shoulders, his throat. "That's diplomatic of you, but I know how I come across at work. It's intentional, mostly." "Mostly." He took a sip of his drink, considering his response. "I learned early in my career to keep certain parts of myself separate, especially in finance, which isn't exactly known for its progressive culture." The implication hung between us, not quite stated but clear enough. I nodded, understanding perfectly. Though the corporate world had evolved significantly, unspoken biases still lingered in many firms, including ours. As a bisexual man who generally dated women, I'd found it easier to let colleagues assume a straight identity by default, mentioning only my relationships with women when personal topics arose. "I understand compartmentalization," I said. Though I'm surprised our compartments overlapped here, of all places. Statistical inevitability, Bo replied with a slight shrug. City this size, limited number of good venues, two people with similar stress relief requirements. Eventually, our paths were bound to cross. Very analytical, I teased. Even off the clock. His expression softened into something more self-deprecating. Occupational hazard. Can't quite turn off the data brain. The song transitioned into something with a faster tempo, the crowd responding with renewed energy. Bo glanced toward the dance floor, then back at me. There was a moment of hesitation, then, do you want to dance? Since we're both here anyway. The invitation surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. We were in a dance club, after all, and had both presumably come for that purpose before our unexpected encounter. Still, it represented another boundary crossing, from coincidental meeting to deliberate shared activity. Sure, I said, finishing my drink and setting the glass on a nearby ledge. Why not? We moved onto the floor together, finding space in the crowd that pressed in from all sides. At first, there was an awkwardness between us, the lingering awareness of our daytime roles making us self-conscious in this new context. But gradually, as the music built and the lights pulsed around us, that hesitation dissolved. Bo moved with surprising grace, his body responding to the rhythm with an ease that suggested long familiarity. I matched his energy, letting the bass guide my movements, conscious of the narrowing space between us as the floor grew more crowded. Occasionally, our eyes would meet, and he would offer that smile I'd never seen at work, open, unguarded, slightly mischievous. We danced through several tracks, the initial strangeness of our situation giving way to a different kind of awareness. I found myself noticing details I'd overlooked during our year of sharing office space. The defined line of his jaw, the way his t-shirt revealed more athletic shoulders than his suit suggested, the expressive quality of his hands as they moved with the music. When the DJ finally transitioned to a slower, more ambient piece, we made our way back to the relative quiet of the bar area, both slightly breathless from exertion. You're good at that, I observed as we waited for fresh drinks. Dancing, I mean. Years of practice, he replied. Started going to clubs in college as a way to work off academic stress. Never really stopped. Same, I admitted. Though there was a dark period in my mid-20s when I tried to convince myself I was too mature for club nights. Bo laughed. Let me guess. Right after you started at Meridian? How did you know? Same thing happened to me at my first finance job. Thought I needed to embody the serious professional around the clock. He accepted his drink from the bartender with a nod of thanks. Took about 6 months of absolute misery before I realized I could excel at work without sacrificing everything that made me. There was something poignant in his observation that resonated with my own experience. I'd gone through a similar phase of overcorrection when I'd first entered the corporate world, before finding a balance that allowed me to maintain my professional standing without complete self-erasure. Hence the compartmentalization, I said, understanding better now. Exactly. Work Bo and actual Bo. He gestured to himself with a wry smile. Though I'm surprised it took a year for these worlds to collide. Would you have preferred they didn't? I asked, suddenly conscious that my presence might be unwelcome in what was clearly his private space. He considered this, his expression thoughtful. I thought I would. But actually, it's kind of a relief. Maintaining completely separate identities gets exhausting after a while. The honesty of his response caught me off guard. It was more personal disclosure than we'd exchanged in a full year of working across from each other, and it hinted at a depth to Bo that I hadn't previously considered. Well, your secret is safe with me, I assured him. What happens at Spectrum stays at Spectrum. I appreciate that, he said, then added with a hint of challenge in his voice, though I'm not actually hiding anything that needs protecting, just exercising my right to privacy. Of course, I said quickly, not wanting to suggest otherwise. I didn't mean to imply. No offense taken, he interrupted, his expression softening. I'm just clarifying. Being private isn't the same as being closeted or ashamed. It's about controlling my own narrative. I nodded, respecting the distinction. I get it. And for what it's worth, I think most of our colleagues would be shocked to discover either of us in a place like this. We both project a certain image at work. True enough, he conceded with a slight smile. Though I think your image is considerably warmer than mine. The team actually likes you. They'd like you too if you joined us for drinks occasionally, I pointed out, or shared more than the bare minimum in team meetings. Probably, he acknowledged. But old habits, you know? It's easier to maintain distance. There was something in his tone, a hint of defensiveness, perhaps, or possibly regret, that made me curious about the experiences that had taught him to keep his guard up. But before I could decide whether to probe further, the conversation was interrupted by a change in the music, the DJ transitioning to a popular track that sent a wave of excitement through the crowd. I love this one, Bo said, his face lighting up with genuine enthusiasm. Dance floor. We returned to dancing, but something had shifted between us. The initial awkwardness of our unexpected meeting had given way to a different kind of tension, a growing awareness that existed alongside our established professional dynamic. As the night progressed, we moved closer, the boundary of personal space gradually diminishing until we were dancing with the kind of proximity that suggested more than coincidental companionship. I couldn't say when exactly the energy changed, but at some point, Bo's hands found my waist during a particularly crowded moment, steadying me as someone pushed past. He didn't remove them immediately, and I didn't step away. Our eyes met in the flashing lights, a question in his that I answered by staying exactly where I was. We continued like that, testing this new territory with careful movements, neither acknowledging verbally what was happening between us. When the club finally announced last call around 2 a.m., we made our way toward the exit together, the unspoken assumption being that our night would continue in some form. Outside, the September air had a crisp edge that felt clarifying after hours in the humid club atmosphere. We stood on the sidewalk, suddenly uncertain now that we were back in the real world, away from the permissive bubble of Spectrum. Well, Bo said, hands in his pockets, this was unexpected. Very, I agreed, equally unsure of the protocol for this situation. But good unexpected, I think. He smiled, relaxing slightly. Definitely good unexpected. He hesitated, then added, do you want to get breakfast? There's an all-night diner about 2 blocks from here that makes decent omelets. The suggestion surprised me, not because I'd expected a different invitation, but because it represented a deliberate choice to extend our interaction beyond the coincidental meeting at the club. This wasn't just 2 colleagues bumping into each other anymore. It was the potential beginning of something else entirely. Breakfast sounds perfect, I said. Lead the way. The diner was exactly as Bo had described, slightly worn around the edges but clean, with red vinyl booths and a counter staffed by a server who looked like she'd seen it all. We settled into a booth near the back, ordered coffee, and studied plastic menus offering every conceivable breakfast combination. I recommend the Denver omelet, Bo said, setting his menu aside. Though the pancakes are good too, if you're in a sweeter mood. Denver omelet it is, I decided, closing my own menu. So, you come here often? He laughed at the accidental pickup line. After Spectrum, yes. Best place to refuel before heading home. Also, I'm convinced they put something addictive in their coffee. As if on cue, the server arrived with 2 steaming mugs. We placed our orders, then settled into a conversation that flowed with surprising ease given our limited prior interactions. Away from both the office and the club, a new version of Bo emerged, thoughtful, articulate, with a dry wit that rarely surfaced at work. He told me about growing up in a small town outside Seattle, being the first in his family to attend college, his initial plan to become an architect before discovering an unexpected aptitude for financial analysis. I shared my own background, East Coast upbringing, liberal arts degree, the series of fortunate connections that had led me to Meridian despite having no particular passion for finance. So why stay? He asked, genuine curiosity in his expression. If it's not your passion. I considered the question, which was more complicated than it might seem. Partly practicality, it pays well, offers stability. Partly inertia, I suppose. And partly because I'm actually good at it, which is satisfying in its own way. He nodded, understanding. The competence trap. I know it well. What about you? I countered. Is financial analysis your great passion in life? A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Not exactly. But like you said, I'm good at it. And it allows me to fund the things I actually care about. Such as travel mainly. Music festivals when I can get to them. I've been working on a side project developing an app for independent artists to connect with venues. Still in early stages, but eventually, I'd like it to be my main focus. This revelation, that cool, reserved Beau harbored entrepreneurial ambitions in the music industry, further complicated my understanding of my colleague. That sounds amazing, I said, genuinely impressed. I had no idea you were interested in that space. Well, we don't exactly discuss personal projects at quarterly reviews, he pointed out with a wry smile. And as we've established, I tend to keep work Beau and actual Beau fairly separate. Until now, I observed. His eyes met mine, something warm and contemplative in his gaze. Until now, he agreed. Our food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. As we ate, I found myself studying Beau with new interest, reconciling the multiple versions I'd now encountered. The reserved professional, the uninhibited dancer, this thoughtful man sharing breakfast and personal history at 3 a.m. Each seemed authentic in its own way, pieces of a whole person more complex than I'd previously allowed. Can I ask you something potentially awkward? Beau said after a comfortable silence. After tonight's series of unexpected developments? Sure, why not? He set down his fork, expression turning more serious. At work, did you know I was gay? Before tonight, I mean. The directness of the question caught me slightly off guard. I didn't know for certain, I admitted. There were office rumors, but I try not to put much stock in those. And it wasn't really my business either way. He nodded, processing this. Fair enough. I've never explicitly hidden it at Meridian, but I don't volunteer the information either. Some colleagues know, others don't. It's not a secret, just private. I understand, I said, meaning it. I'm bisexual myself, though it doesn't come up much at work since I've mostly dated women in recent years. Easier to let people assume what they want. Something shifted in Beau's expression, surprise, followed by a kind of recognition. I wouldn't have guessed that either, he said softly. Seems we've both been making assumptions. Hazard of compartmentalized lives, I replied with a slight smile. Limited information leads to incomplete pictures. And now, he asked, the question hanging between us with multiple possible interpretations. Now I'm seeing a much more interesting picture, I said, holding his gaze. One I'd like to understand better. The moment stretched between us, charged with possibility. Outside the diner windows, the city was in that strange liminal space between late night and early morning. Quiet, but not quite still, darkness beginning to soften toward dawn. It's almost morning, Beau observed, glancing at his watch. We should probably head out. We paid our bill, splitting it after a brief, good-natured argument, and stepped outside into the cool pre-dawn air. The question of what happened next hung unspoken between us. Can I walk you home? Beau asked, breaking the silence. Or to a taxi, if you prefer. I'm actually not far from here, I said. About 15 minutes walking. I'm in the opposite direction, he said, a note of regret in his voice. Back toward downtown. We stood there, neither quite ready to end the night, but unsure how to extend it appropriately. Finally, I took a chance. I've enjoyed tonight, I said. Getting to know non-work Beau? I'd like to do it again sometime. Intentionally, rather than by statistical inevitability. His smile returned, warming his features in a way I was quickly coming to appreciate. I'd like that too, though it does complicate our carefully maintained compartmentalization. Maybe some compartments are meant to be connected, I suggested, or at least to have doors between them. Metaphorical architectural features, he said with a soft laugh. Very poetic for 4 a.m. We exchanged phone numbers, a strangely formal gesture given that we had each other's work contact information, but somehow appropriate for this new dimension of our relationship. Then, with a brief embrace that lingered just long enough to suggest future possibilities, we parted ways, heading in opposite directions through the quiet city streets. Monday morning arrived with the peculiar surreality that often follows unexpected weekend developments. I entered the office with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, unsure how our encounter would translate to the professional environment we'd both been so careful to maintain. Beau was already at his desk when I arrived, impeccably dressed in one of his trademark tailored suits, hair perfectly styled, glasses in place. He looked exactly as he had every workday for the past year. The club version of him, with his tousled hair and uninhibited movements, seemed almost like a dream. Morning, I said, setting my bag on my desk. Good weekend. He glanced up, his expression professionally neutral with just the faintest hint of recognition in his eyes. Morning. Yes, quite productive. Yours. Same. I replied, understanding immediately that we were maintaining our established boundaries, at least within the office. Productive. The day proceeded normally, client calls, spreadsheet analysis, the usual Monday departmental meeting. Bo was his typical reserved self in professional contexts, offering concise insights when required, but otherwise keeping his contributions minimal. If anyone had witnessed our dance floor connection or pre-dawn breakfast, they would never have guessed it from our workplace interactions. It wasn't until late afternoon, as I was reviewing quarterly projections, that my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dinner tomorrow? There's a good Thai place near my apartment. B. I saved the number in my contacts, a small smile playing at my lips as I typed a response. Sounds perfect. Send me the address. When I glanced up, Bo was focused on his computer screen, his expression revealing nothing. But as I watched, his phone lit up with my reply, and the corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. And so began our careful navigation of dual relationships, colleagues by day, something more personal developing after hours. Dinner at the Thai restaurant led to a film at an independent cinema the following weekend, which led to cooking dinner at my apartment the week after that. Each encounter revealed new facets of Bo, his unexpected knowledge of film history, his surprisingly good cooking skills, his genuine interest in my graphic design hobby that I pursued on the side. At work, we maintained our professional distance, though I began to notice subtle shifts. Bo would occasionally join team lunches that he'd previously declined, offering measured but more frequent contributions to group discussions. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me during meetings, a thoughtful expression on his face that disappeared the moment our eyes met. The dual nature of our relationship created a strange tension, a shared secret that wasn't quite a secret, a connection that existed in one context but was carefully modulated in another. We never explicitly discussed these boundaries, but seemed to understand them intuitively. At Meridian, we were colleagues first and foremost. About a month after our encounter at Spectrum, Bo invited me to his apartment for the first time. He lived in a modern high-rise downtown, his unit on the 23rd floor offering spectacular views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. The space was minimalist but warm, clean lines and neutral colors accented with unexpected touches of personality. A collection of vinyl records displayed on open shelving, framed concert posters from venues around the world, a sleek DJ controller setup in one corner. This explains a lot, I said, examining the controller with interest. You're not just a fan, you actually DJ? Occasionally, he admitted, a hint of self-consciousness in his tone. Small venues, private parties. Nothing professional level. Will you play something for me? I asked, genuinely curious to see this side of him in action. He hesitated, then nodded. Let me make us drinks first. As Bo prepared cocktails in his streamlined kitchen, I explored the apartment further, noting the telling details that office Bo would never reveal. Travel books stacked on a side table, a yoga mat rolled neatly in a corner, a shelf dedicated to photography books. The overall impression was of someone with broader interests and deeper passions than his work persona ever suggested. Here, he said, returning with 2 glasses of something amber-colored over ice. Old-fashioned. Hope that works for you. Perfect, I assured him, accepting the drink. Our fingers brushed during the exchange, a small contact that nonetheless sent a current of awareness through me. Though we'd been seeing each other regularly for weeks, our physical interaction had remained relatively limited. A touch here, a brief embrace there, nothing that couldn't be walked back if needed. Bo moved to the DJ controller, activated it with practiced movements, and began to create something that started as ambient background but gradually evolved into a more complex, layered sound. His focus as he worked was complete, the same concentration he brought to financial analyses now directed toward building and shaping music. It was mesmerizing to watch. This is impressive, I said when he finally looked up, the mix now flowing autonomously. Another side of Bo I never would have guessed existed. He smiled, some of his usual reserve falling away as it always did when we were alone together. There are quite a few sides you haven't seen yet. The statement hung between us, laden with possibility. We'd been circling each other for weeks now, building connection through conversation and shared experiences, but carefully avoiding defining what was developing between us. The professional complication remained an unspoken consideration. Workplace relationships brought their own set of challenges, especially between colleagues who worked as closely as we did. I'd like to, I said simply, meeting his gaze directly. Bo set his drink aside and moved closer, his expression shifting to something more intent. Are you sure about this, Kellen? Once we cross certain lines, it might be difficult to go back to being just colleagues if things don't work out. The question was fair, and I appreciated his directness. I've thought about that, I admitted. But I'm more interested in exploring what could be than maintaining what is out of caution. He nodded slowly, processing my answer. I feel the same way. But I needed to be sure we were on the same page. Definitely same page, I confirmed, setting my own glass down on a nearby table. Possibly same paragraph. That earned a genuine laugh, the kind that transformed his features and never appeared in our workplace interactions. Always so precise with your metaphors. Occupational hazard, I replied, echoing his words from our night at Spectrum. The space between us had narrowed as we spoke, neither of us moving deliberately, but both gravitating closer nonetheless. Now, with decision made and concerns addressed, Bo closed the remaining distance and kissed me, a careful exploration that quickly deepened as weeks of restrained attraction finally found expression. What followed was a discovery of all the ways work Bo differed from Private Bo, the surprising gentleness of his hands, the quiet sounds of appreciation he made, the complete focus he brought to physical intimacy. The reserve that characterized his professional persona gave way to a passionate attentiveness that suggested depth rather than coldness had been his defining quality all along. Afterward, as we lay tangled in his absurdly comfortable bed, city lights twinkling beyond the windows, Bo traced patterns on my skin with thoughtful fingers. What are you thinking? I asked, watching his expression shift through emotions I couldn't quite identify. That this complicates things beautifully, he replied, his voice soft in the dim room. And that I should have trusted my initial impression of you a year ago. Which was dangerous, he said with a slight smile. In the best possible way. I had a feeling you might be the one person at Meridian who could see past the work version of me. Is that why you kept your distance? I asked, pieces falling into place. You were protecting your compartmentalization. He nodded, a hint of vulnerability in his expression. I've learned to be careful about mixing personal and professional. Previous experience taught me some difficult lessons. I wanted to ask for details, but since that was a conversation for another time. Instead, I said, for what it's worth, I don't think anyone at work would recognize either of us right now. That earned another laugh, more relaxed this time. Definitely not. Can you imagine Marcus's face if he could see us? The image was indeed comical. Our perpetually stressed colleague confronted with evidence that his most reserved teammate had a whole life beyond quarterly projections and client presentations. So what happens on Monday? I asked, the practical question unavoidable despite the contentment of the moment. Do we go back to professional distance? Bo considered this, his expression turning thoughtful. I think we maintain appropriate boundaries at work, yes. But perhaps the walls between compartments don't need to be quite so impermeable. He traced the line of my collarbone with gentle fingers. I'm not interested in advertising our personal relationship at the office, but I don't want to pretend it doesn't exist either. A middle path, I suggested. Professional with occasional acknowledgement of connection. Exactly. Though I reserve the right to maintain my aloof reputation. His tone was light, but I sensed genuine concern beneath it. It's taken me a long time to establish a professional identity I'm comfortable with. Your work persona is safe with me, I assured him. Though I admit I'm partial to this version. His smile returned, warming his features in a way that still felt like a privilege to witness. This version is exclusively for after hours. The following Monday established our new pattern. At the office, we were colleagues first, focused, professional, maintaining appropriate boundaries. But small things shifted, a coffee appearing on my desk when Bo made a cafe run, brief text exchanges during tedious meetings, the occasional lunch taken together in the atrium rather than at our respective desks. To casual observers, we had simply developed a friendlier working relationship, nothing particularly noteworthy in an office where team cohesion was encouraged. If anyone noticed the occasional lingering glance or private smile, they gave no indication. After hours, we explored this new dimension of our relationship with the same careful intentionality that characterized our professional lives. Weeknight dinners, weekend brunches, More nights at Spectrum where I could watch Bo transform from contained professional to uninhibited dancer. Gradually, our separate lives intertwined, toiletries migrating between apartments, spare clothes left just in case, keys exchanged for emergencies. 2 months after our initial encounter at Spectrum, the company holiday party presented our first real test of boundary navigation. Historically, Bo had made brief appearances at such functions, arriving punctually, engaging in minimal required socializing, departing at the earliest reasonable opportunity. I typically stayed longer, comfortable with the casual professional socialization that such events offered. We arrived separately by unspoken agreement, maintaining our established workplace dynamic. But as the evening progressed and inhibitions lowered with each trip to the open bar, maintaining complete professional distance became more challenging. I found my attention repeatedly drawn to Bo across the room, appreciating how the subtly festive burgundy of his tie brought out the warmth in his complexion, how his rare laugh transformed his features when a colleague managed to amuse him. "You're staring," observed Rachel from marketing, appearing at my elbow with a knowing smile. Rather obviously, I might add. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, caught off guard by her perception. "Just zoning out," I claimed, taking a sip of my whiskey. "Long week." She hummed, clearly unconvinced. "You know, half the office has been speculating about you two for weeks now. The suddenly coordinated lunch breaks, the inside jokes during meetings. We're colleagues who get along well," I said, aiming for casual dismissal. "Nothing worth speculating about." Rachel's smile widened. "If you say so, but for what it's worth, I think it's nice. Bo seems happier lately, less isolated." Before I could formulate a response that neither confirmed nor denied her implication, the subject of our conversation approached, 2 fresh drinks in hand. "Rachel," he acknowledged with a polite nod. "Kellen, I thought you might need a refresh." "Thanks," I said, accepting the whiskey and trying not to read too much into the gesture. Colleagues brought each other drinks at parties all the time. It meant nothing in particular, except Rachel's knowing smile suggested otherwise, and the brief touch of Bo's fingers against mine during the exchange seemed deliberate rather than accidental. "I was just telling Kellen how nice it is to see you participating more in team activities lately," Rachel said, her tone innocent but her eyes shrewd. "The departmental dynamic has improved." Bo's expression remained professionally pleasant, but I caught the slight tension in his jaw, discomfort with being the subject of observation, even positive observation. "Meridian emphasizes collaboration," he replied, the corporate platitude delivered with just enough sincerity to be convincing. "I'm simply aligning with company values." Rachel laughed, not fooled for a moment. "Of course, very commendable." She glanced between us, then mercifully changed the subject. "Are either of you going to the industry conference in February? I hear the San Diego venue is spectacular." The conversation shifted to safer territory, but the moment had illuminated something important. Our careful compartmentalization wasn't as seamless as we believed. People noticed changes, drew conclusions, observed patterns. The illusion of separation was just that, an illusion. Later that night, at Bo's apartment, we discussed the interaction as we unwound from the corporate festivities. "Rachel knows," I said, loosening my tie and sinking onto his couch. "Or strongly suspects, at least." Bo nodded, pouring us each a nightcap from his impressive whiskey collection. "She's not the only one. I've gotten a few comments from team members. Subtle, but pointed." I accepted the glass he offered, considering the implications. "Does it bother you? People knowing?" He sat beside me, expression contemplative. "Not as much as I expected it would, though I still prefer to keep my personal life mostly separate from work." "Is that sustainable at this point?" I asked gently. "The separation, I mean." Bo was quiet for a moment, sipping his whiskey. "Probably not entirely," he finally admitted. "The compartments have definitely started to leak into each other." "Is that a bad thing?" He turned to face me more directly, his expression softening. "I'm beginning to think it isn't. I've spent years maintaining these separate versions of myself, but lately..." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Lately it feels like I'm more fully myself in all contexts. Less fragmented." The admission struck me as significant coming from someone who had so carefully maintained his professional boundaries. "I've noticed that," I said. "You seem more present at work. Still professional, but less distant." "It's been a deliberate experiment," he acknowledged. Seeing how much of my actual self I can bring to the office without compromising my professional standing. And the results? A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Preliminary findings suggest integration is more sustainable than compartmentalization, though additional research is required. Always the analyst, I teased, leaning in to kiss him briefly, even when discussing personal growth. Occupational hazard, he replied, the familiar refrain now carrying a warmth that belied its origin as a defensive explanation. As we settled into comfortable silence, Bo's head resting against my shoulder, I reflected on our unexpected journey, from distant colleagues to whatever we were becoming now. It had begun with a chance encounter in a place designed for escape, but had evolved into something that allowed for greater authenticity in all aspects of our lives. The following Monday, Bo surprised me by suggesting we commute to work together, a small but significant shift in our careful navigation of personal and professional boundaries. As we walked into the Meridian building side by side, maintaining appropriate professional distance, but clearly arriving as a unit, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the polished marble walls, two men in well-tailored suits, briefcases in hand, presenting nearly identical professional facades to the corporate world. But now I knew what existed beneath that carefully constructed surface. The passionate dancer who lost himself in music, the thoughtful man who cooked elaborate meals while discussing philosophy, the tender lover who traced patterns on my skin in the darkness. And he knew me equally well, not just the competent account manager, but the complex person behind the professional role. In the elevator, as we ascended toward another workday, Bo's hand briefly found mine. A momentary contact, hidden from view, gone before the doors opened to our floor. Ready? He asked, the question encompassing more than just the workday ahead. Absolutely, I replied, stepping forward with him into whatever came next.